Everyone, please take your seats, and we encourage you to fill up the middle section here. Thank you so much.
I was going to speak louder, but this will be better. All right. I'm so pleased to be moderating this afternoon's panel with such an illustrious group of experts and speakers that will be here with us. The title of our session, Embracing Change, Communities, Companies, and Careers in Transition, is appropriate, and I think we all appreciate change. And certainly the organization that I lead recognized the terrific pace of transition of change a few years ago. And as we did our strategic renewal, ultimately developed something called the Collaborative Economic Development Approach, which really relies upon bridging the gap that exists between the public, private, and civil society sectors to generate economic activity that benefits individuals and the communities in which they live. And so you can imagine how interested and delighted I was to see the conference that we have here today and to participate in the conference with all of you over the past few days. A tremendous pleasure, and I'm certainly looking very much forward to hearing from our speakers and panelists. To get us started, it's really an honor and a privilege to be able to introduce to you our keynote speaker, Minister Morten Dahlin, Minister for Cities and Rural Districts, Minister for Ecclesiastical Affairs, and Minister for Nordic Cooperation for Denmark. Minister.
Do you need this? We do need that. Well, thank you very much. It's an honor for Denmark, Sweden, and the Øresund region to host this year's Local Development Forum. And I would like to start out by expressing my sincere gratitude for the opportunity to deliver these remarks ahead of what I hope will be a fruitful debate about our shared challenges and opportunities. Addressing future challenges and seizing opportunities is something that this region has been good at for centuries. And allow me to take you through a brief journey through time. And we'll start way back. In the 12th century, the Archbishop of Copenhagen, Absalon, he commissioned the Danish chronicler Saxo to write a chronicle detailing the history of the Danes and the Danish kingdom. Saxo's work, Gesta Danorum, is now considered one of the cornerstones of Danish history, and it's an invaluable source of our early history. In Gesta Danorum, what is interesting is that Saxo also describes the Øresund region. At that time, life here was characterized by hunting, trading, and especially by fishing. Growth, it centered around cities, of course, like Copenhagen, Malmö, Helsingborg, Elsinore, with the Øresund's customs duty famously making a lot of money for Denmark throughout centuries. And what is even more interesting about Saxo is that he back then noticed how close the integration was in the Øresund region, famously describing how the herring population in the sea was so dense that one could almost walk across the straits on the herring's back from Denmark to Sweden. Today, unfortunately, we don't have a lot of herring left, but instead we have the Øresund Bridge that now stands as a symbol of our modern connectivity, and next year we will celebrate its 25th anniversary. And even though it's sad that we don't have a lot of herring left, I feel much safer crossing the bridge than walking on a stream of herring. But alongside the physical connection with the bridge, we have emerged as one of the world's most competitive metropolitan regions by fostering innovation in the labor market, driving the green transition, and building a resilient infrastructure. And this success extends across workforce mobility, education, tourism, and much more. Every day, more than 20,000 people commute between Sweden and Denmark to either work or to study. For me, it's key that we ensure this region will keep on being an attractive, competitive, and transparent place to work. And with this vision in mind, I am very pleased that Denmark and Sweden together have revised the Øresund Agreement dating back to 2003. The agreement aims at improving everyday life and conditions for the workforce across the borders in this region by reducing the administrative burdens and simplifying the current taxation regulations for both commuters and employers. I think it was a big step for the very important link between Denmark and Sweden in the Øresund region. And I believe that in many ways, the Øresund region serves as a model of what strong regional cooperative can achieve. I am particularly pleased that this region is being highlighted at this forum and that you have had the chance to experience both Malmö and today Copenhagen here in the UN city. As I'm sure the panelists will underline later, the development often emerges from overcoming specific challenges. And while we are undoubtedly better off today than we were at the time of Saxo, we still do face significant challenges, many of which are growing in complexity. And these challenges, they are not just regional, they are actually global in their nature. And they're not only physical, like crossing Øresund itself, but also digital. And this is why we cannot seek solutions solely behind our own borders. We must turn to our colleagues and partners around the world to find sustainable, long-lasting answers. As the Minister for Nordic Cooperation, my focus is on fostering these vital connections and ensuring that our region remains at the forefront of global development. And let me give you just one example of how we can do that. Medicon Valley, which spans from eastern Denmark to southern Sweden, is one of the most important growth areas within life science. And it's also considered one of the strongest clusters within the field in all of Europe. There is a strong cross-border collaboration through various networks, and this could not be done if hospitals, universities, and the industries itself were not all inclined to cooperate also across the borders. And why do we do this? We do this because we see advantages in it, but also because our 4 Nordic prime ministers have set out a very ambitious vision for the Nordics to become the most integrated and sustainable region in the world by 2030. It's a bold vision that requires concerned effort across multiple fronts, And I believe that this forum can and will play a crucial role in advancing that agenda. And I believe it is essential to monitor and evaluate political visions like the Nordic Prime Minister's vision to ensure that they not only inspire change and development within our own region, but it also serves as a model for others. An independent evaluation by strong external partners such as the OECD could provide valuable insights and further enhance the impact of our efforts. Finally, I wish you all a fruitful and engaging discussion on how we can strengthen collaboration across regions and foster local leadership to drive meaningful change. I look forward to continuing this dialogue with you and working together with all of you to turn our shared vision into reality. Thank you very much.
Many thanks to the Minister for his very, I think, relevant and appropriate comments as we prepare for our panel. And our panel that I'd like to invite to come and join me on the stage, and I will be more than delighted to introduce them to all of you once they've taken their positions. Very good. I'll use the microphone this time again as well. And I'll encourage all of you as well. This is very well choreographed, but we have a few details that we're working out as we go through it. Let me begin by introducing this wonderful group of panelists that will be here to share with us today their thoughts and comments about the topics that we'll be discussing. I'll start with Mary Ellen Wiederwall, who comes to us from the United States, President and CEO of Accelerator for America. Mary Ellen, welcome. Thank you. Marie Starke, Mayor of Koiglo here in Denmark, not far away, as many of you know, and quite a dynamic place that we're very excited to hear your experiences about. Welcome. Nana Øyland, Vice Chair of Danish Trade Union Confederation. I've received some lessons in pronunciation from our guests as well, to the best of my ability, so bear with me as we go through this. Thank you, thank you. And Rui Monteiro, who's the Director of the Department of Economics for Porto City Council in Portugal. Welcome. So you've signed up, you've come here, surely not because it's the only session being offered presently, but because it's the most interesting one available presently. And so we will be talking about the pace of transition, and I think we talk about it, we hear about it all of the time, and I think there's no denying that it just keeps accelerating. It keeps accelerating. And happily, all of our experts that are here with us today have lots of experience. They'll be sharing with us their experiences both in terms of what works with these transitions and perhaps even some interesting stories about things that haven't worked quite as well. Past transitions offer hints about what works. However, current and future challenges will test our creativity and collaboration skills to adapt and overcome as the future comes. Questions. We're going to start with some questions. We will have an opportunity, as you know from the itinerary, to take some questions from the audience as we progress near the end. So I'd encourage you, if anything comes up that you're finding you'd like to probe deeper into, then hold on to that. We'll come to you. For our panel, and I really will throw this out to anyone that would like to share with us their thoughts. What lessons can be learned from past transitions, both successful and unsuccessful, that can inform our approach to managing future changes? Anyone?
He said ladies first. I guess we better jump in and go for it. Well, we are in such a dynamic time right now as a globe, and we are still coming to terms with that in the United States. We had this peace dividend for all of these years, and now that is changing very quickly, impacting obviously how we feel and how we are economically secure, and sometimes how we feel about economics and the reality of economics are not the same thing. We got a little presidential election this fall. We're testing that out at home.
We hadn't heard about that.
No, sure not. You can talk to me about that afterwards. Most of what you've heard is sadly true. But so we're going through this time where we had the peace dividend, we had globalization, and then we had a pandemic. I never thought I'd live through a pandemic. I'd read about them in school, right? Knew that they happened. Never once occurred to me that I would experience one. And that combined with the destabilization, with obviously a lot of military action around the globe, is creating a lot of uncertainty. So yes, you look into the rearview mirror and say, where have we been and where are we going? And one of the things that I think we're most challenged by in the States is this sort of halcyon view of the past, that we live in history with this glow around it, that everything was perfect. And of course, the 20th century was pretty good for industrialized countries, and we think it's always going to be that way. And we don't recognize we were actually living through an unprecedented period of time and an economic expansion that we probably won't ever see again in terms of the way population trends are going, and obviously the planet and decarbonization, what's happening with climate and what we need to do. So I'm not sure that we have recent experience other than to recognize the constant state of change. And something a friend said to me once has been echoing thinking about this, which is that the windshield is so much bigger than the rearview mirror for a reason. Look ahead. So we have to learn from history and understand it so that we don't repeat our mistakes. But we've got to look ahead, and I feel a little bit like the country I'm from is kind of stuck in neutral or first gear in that car.
Thank you. Yes, please go ahead.
Is it working?
No. I think it's on now. Thank you for inviting me. I guess I'm representing the local democracy, and as a decision maker, I live with the decisions I make myself. I live in the municipality that I'm the mayor of, and we have undergone a huge transition in the municipality of Køge. And one of the things that I have learned is, well, I've learned a lot of things, but most of all, how important it is to give us all time to think about the transition that we are going to make, look ahead, have the patience to make it because it's not undergone in a day, and be very good at dialogue with other politicians, with the people of the city, with the business life, the other interests that could be in the transition that you're going to make. We've been quite good at that in Køge. Some of the things we've also learned is that when the visions become reality and you have to make the decisions that make the visions reality, you need very good legal advice. We have certainly learned from our mistakes also economically, and we have learned that legal advice is very, very important, and that when you are in a transition where a lot of things are being built, a lot of changing is happening at once, then you need very clear contracts and deals that are very obvious also 5 years later, when some of the things have been built and are working in reality. So that is certainly one of the things that I have learned. But patience most of all. And when you are working with politicians, it is also very important. You're also talking about it, Mary Ellen, that perhaps it's the same parties that are in the city council, for example, but it's not necessarily the same persons. So I'm a social democrat myself, and I've been in the city council for all of the years, but I have many new politicians, many new colleagues, and they need to also take in the transition and being ambassador of it and taking responsibility of it, although the first decisions were made 10 years ago perhaps, and they are quite new in politics. I hope it makes sense what I'm saying. So patience and good legal advice, and beware of that new people are having the responsibility as time goes by. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much. Any other contributions to this particular question? Please, Nana, go ahead.
Now it's working. Thank you. Well, my perspective is on the labor market. And in Denmark, we have a long tradition for working together with the state, the unions, and also the employees in the condition of the labor market. And during the pandemic, we were together all the time. When people were staying at home, we were together trying to work out deals that could keep the country running. And I think that was, of course, a very special situation. The transition, when it comes to the green transition, it's different, but it still also is something that's happening very fast. So one of the things that we will keep on doing is trying to create an environment for the people, the workforce here in Denmark. So we know we will have a lot of job losses because some of the places where people are working are not considered what we should be earning money from in the future. But we also have a lot of openings of jobs. So the big task for us is to help people to find the path to the new career opportunities. And sometimes we could do it ourselves as unions, but sometimes we also have to do it together with the state. And we have a long tradition for doing that in Denmark, and I think that will help us a lot. So when we look at really great changes, something we all can agree on, that we want to do it in a way that people feel safe. And if you shall have people to feel safe, you have to have some kind of security. So they know that there will be another job in the end of the transition, or if there should be, for a little while, they will be without a job, there will be some economic security. And I think we have done it for many, many years, working together in this tripartite system. And I think that's something that can help us very much in the transition from we're standing to look at. We're in the middle of it. We're not looking at it anymore. We're in the middle of it. And I think that's something that could keep us doing it in more speed, maybe, than you were a little concerned, Mary Ellen, about how fast you could do it. And I think we could do it a little faster because we could work together on it. So that's something that I would like to share with you here today. So.
Ray, would you like to share a comment as well?
Yes, very briefly. Hope my English is up to the level of the rest of the panel.
It's fantastic.
The last big change that the city has seen, besides COVID, of course, in terms of economic landscape, was 2008 crisis. And what we learned about that was the need, I can elaborate a little bit more afterwards, is the need for flexibility and adaptability. I can say that the top 10 ranked companies that, in terms of workforce, changed 70% in the last 8 years. The second lesson is the word public-private partnership, like it was mentioned already in the panel. We need to work with stakeholders, and I can elaborate a little bit more about that, but we have been increasingly working with private partnerships in order to address the multiple challenges, including the talent needs. And the last lesson that we have learned is the need to quickly adapt to the market. The market is us as consumers, and we change every day. And companies need to reply to our demands, and for that they need talent to do it. And it's crucial that all these parts are aligned, otherwise we are out of the game very quickly.
Thank you, Rui. And it's worth noting, OECD lead visited Portugal a few years ago as a group, and the consequences of the change and the planning that were undertaken post 2008 were remarkable. I mean, I think everyone that was able to participate in that, we've seen the economic performance, of course, change and do excessively well, but the planning, the strategic planning, the focus, all of these things, I think for anyone that was able to participate, and I think this speaks to some of the benefits of the OECD LEAD forum, I think really inspired a lot of, probably a lot of transition in the rest of the world. And so job very well done, and something that I think many of us continue to pay a lot of attention to. I appreciate all the comments. I mean, I think consistently what we're hearing is certainly change in the more desirable circumstances is something that we're able to anticipate and able to plan for. Of course, sometimes it's a shorter window of time, sometimes it's a longer window of time, but it is ultimately inevitable. And something that we've encountered, and I think this is Mary Ellen's comment to a certain extent, is that if we don't change, we will change. Circumstances will change. And I think to motivate, the title of our afternoon is a bit presumptuous in terms of embracing change, because I think one of the greatest challenges sometimes is fear of change. So Nana, your comments as well about creating ultimately a very safe space where individuals feel that they can embrace it, very important. And Marie, the tools. I think we were going to talk about tools. I think the legal advice is a very important tool, certainly in the context that you live in. This becomes a very critical dimension of change. Any other comments about tools or methods? So we do have a lot of practitioners that are here. Any comments with respect to that you might share?
I was just thinking of the great Shakespeare quote about first, let's kill all the lawyers. But there's a lesson in that, all laughing aside, to your point, is that the lawyers are there to help protect the system and protect, in our case, democracy, protect the capitalism, and to protect our way of life. And so when Shakespeare wrote, I can't remember which play that was, first let's kill all the lawyers, it was a way of enforcing an autocratic view. And so there's something really truthful, I think, about what you said. And I worked in city government for 8.5 years, and I had a lot of lawyers telling me what to do, or not to do most of the time. Mm-hmm.
Very good. Thank you, Mary Ellen. We'll move on to our next segment, which is really about fostering public-private collaboration and cultivating resilience. Working together holds the potential to lead to positive outcomes, especially when tackling complex challenges. We've talked a lot about collaboration. In this context, focusing on how we, instead of how I, can open up possibilities for joint solutions across sectors and enhance the readiness of communities, companies, and workers to adapt to transitions and shocks. There's a common theme throughout our forum. I think this morning we talked a lot about how we can move faster on our own, but we can move much farther together. And I think all of us appreciate that in the work that we do. As I mentioned in my opening remarks, SEDEC believes collaboration is a key to economic creativity and innovation. Our experience, contrary to that of others, is that communities and individuals need to see collaboration as a hard skill, requiring the ability to integrate and balance self, employer, and community interests in practical and concrete ways. And so let me begin this part of our conversation by asking first, and I'll ask very specifically this time, first to Mary Ellen and to Rui, from your view, what role does training and lifelong learning play in preparing individuals and communities for transition?
It's just absolutely critical. And for those of you who were in here for the last panel, you heard a lot about what's changing in our workforce. We've already touched on that here today. You know, having an educated populace is critical for the strength and perpetuity of democracy. Public education, I think, is one of the greatest foundations of most of the places that we live and work. But now, so you start with that, that's your baseline. Now we have this rapidly changing economy, and the jobs that people were prepared for no longer exist or are changing dramatically. Automation, AI. Pre-pandemic, when I was leading economic development in my hometown of Louisville, Kentucky, the Brookings Institution, which is one of our leading think tanks in the US, published the top 10 cities whose job markets were most at risk to automation. Louisville made the list. We called it the top 10 list we didn't want to be on. Top 10 place to visit, top 10 place to drink bourbon, and one of the worst places for automation if you want to keep a job. So it really was a shock to the system. And so we looked inside and said, wow, what do we need to do to prepare for this? And being a traditional manufacturing logistics economy, we knew we needed to launch new training initiatives and work with partners. Partnership is a huge piece of this, and put together a future of work initiative. It was a partnership with a major corporation, which then grew into a partnership with many local companies and our workforce board, our community college, and others to get ahead of this. But we are having to run very fast to keep up with the way that technology is advancing. And so it really is a demand on local leaders to do this. There's funds from, in our case, state governments and federal government, but most of the workforce training and most of the education funding in the US is at the local level. And so local leaders are much more deeply involved in workforce development than they've ever been. And it's critical to your economy for the future.
Absolutely. Thank you for that. Marie, would you like to add?
Yes, of course, training and lifelong learning is crucial. What we have seen in the city in the last years is that the skills that are needed are becoming increasingly out of date, and sometimes the traditional learning system of universities and polytechnicals are not able to keep up with the rhythm that the labor market demands in terms of skills, especially when we are talking about digital economy. That is something that is now very present in Porto. What is happening in Porto that I can share, I think that's it. I'm here to share some of our experience, good and bad, is that in these cases we have witnessed that associations and even companies are increasingly taking in their own hands training skills to address specific needs of the market. These are courses that don't give a degree, but that the market identifies as very crucial because of the thing that I mentioned in the beginning. Time goes by very fast, and someone that enters in this September in a course of 3 years or 5 years in IT engineering, it's a long time. So we have been witnessing even this as 3 months in the city of Porto, a huge bank giving grants to an association called Porto Tech Hub that combines more than 50 companies in the IT sector. That is a sponsorship 50% of the course, of the value of the course. So what we are witnessing is nevertheless the importance of public and private education at high level. We need more elasticity in terms of keeping up with the demands of the market, and the public-private partnership in this field has been crucial. Otherwise, the students get out, and the companies say, okay, this is okay, the university is very good, but this is not actually what I need today. So this kind of, let's say, shorter courses, shorter learning, very dedicated to specific topics, especially, again, in a digital-based economy, like it's the one that is emerging in Porto and now consolidating, is something that we are witnessing. And we also have embraced international cases of success. I will give an example. I think maybe someone in the room maybe know the school. That is a French school that is called 42. Anyone? Okay, thank you. Two people. 42 school. It's a huge success, and we just look and say, okay, let's see how this works. It's already in Porto, in Lisbon, and it makes all the sense because it fills the gap that I talked about. So it's an international example that we seen and we brought to the city. So that's a good, very example that I encourage everyone to look for, because it's not even from Porto, it's from France. So I'm okay on suggesting it.
Thank you, Ray. Very, very good comments as well. And I think very interesting, increasingly, employers seeking skills as opposed to certifications and degrees in many ways. We have a number of Canadian companies that have gone to not looking at the profile of a person's educational background being represented by a degree, but instead, what is the list of skills that you've been able to acquire? And consequently, being able to hire, in many cases, individuals that may not have met the typical profile of the jobs in the past. So a very, very good comment, and certainly, I think in many ways captures one of the consequences of that rapid transition. We're seeing that, just that rapid movement. Maria and Nana, your question. From your experience, what are some successful examples of public-private collaboration in regional development that have effectively supported transitions? How can these models be scaled or adapted to other regions facing similar challenges? Would you like to get us started?
Yeah, and once again, I will take my platform from where I come from and what I have learned. Køge, in my childhood, Køge was this little city 40 kilometers south of Copenhagen with a lot of smelly factories and blue-collar workers. And when the wall fell in '89 and the globalization sort of hit Europe in the 90s, then we sort of asked each other, what should we live of in the future? And we had 6 visions that we have worked upon since then. And 2 of the things was that we needed a bigger harbor. So we increased our harbor, so it's now 3 times as big as it is now. Was then, I'm sorry. And the other thing was that the old part of the harbor, as a lot of other harbor cities have done, we needed apartments there and livability there. In my childhood, we couldn't see you couldn't live by the sea, but you can live by the sea now in Køge. And both are examples of public-private cooperation. The new city by the harbor is made from a company that we, as a municipality, went into with a foundation. We made a private limited company and has developed our city harbor with apartments and has undergone a huge transition with new kinds of citizens living there, earning more money, they have a higher educational level. And that has been a huge dynamo for the rest of the region, because then we had a lot of new educations in Køge, and the region of Zealand decided to place the hospital in Køge, 4,000 new workplaces, a lot of doctors. Now also the doctors' education is in Køge. We have never had a long education in Køge before. So by working with private companies, with education, different kind of education centers, we have undergone this transition. And again, back to my point from my last speak was that patience is certainly one of the things, but also the vision, the seal, I think you called it? No? The windshield. Windshield, yes. Always having the windshield in front of you, remembering, why was it we did this, and how come we made that decision 5 years ago, and why is it important still to have this vision and keep on working together on the vision with the companies, with the education centers, with the people around it, and having their everyday life in the area. That is so important, to always have the engagement into following the windshield. And one day you can cut the line and open a totally new harbor and being proud of that, and being proud of the work you have done together with a lot of other people. And we wouldn't have undergone this transition without the companies in Køge and new companies in Køge, without the educational centers, without the region that decided to place the hospital in Køge, a new railway also. And all of that has been a dynamo for the rest of the region.
Fantastic. We all have to go visit.
Do.
We all have to go visit. Nana, would you like to respond to that question as well?
Yes. My experience tells me that one of the crucial things is to have an educational system that can work together with people. Maybe I think it's the people without education at all. That's the most important part here, because when we are so busy here in Denmark right now, almost everybody is working. And so it has been a really good start for people who have been on the other side of the labor market, not having a job, to come into the labor market. And one of the things that have been really helpful in that situation is the vocational educational training system that we have here in Denmark. That means that you can take very short courses and then be able to work and have really good jobs, because when we are doing the green transition, a lot of people want this fjernvarme, that I don't know what's called in English. Remote heating, yeah, of course, to their houses, and that's a lot of work to take up the dirt in the ground and put down big pipes so we can have this remote heating to the houses. And we can do really quick courses, and that can help people to have really good jobs. So that is one of the systems that really have worked with us in this transition. And just to take a company and what they have been doing, I read about a company that we have worked very close with called Hardy, who's down in Falster, a very southern part of Denmark and a very rural area. And it was not really working well for them. They were doing some agricultural systems, and they were not having a lot to do down there. So they were talking to the unions, should we let some people go, or should we make maybe some kind of rotation, then we could share the jobs. But then instead of all that, then they decided to make a big vocational training system. So part of the time people were taking courses in AI, in maybe taking courses in English or Danish or digital learning, and the others were working. And the reason we can do that when a company is short of money is because there are a lot of funding when it comes to people having an income when they are attending the courses. So that could keep the company running, and maybe they will not have all the workers back, but then we will have some workers who could go on to new jobs. And I think that's very crucial, especially when we look at some of the more rural areas, because sometimes the company comes there and start up a new company when they can see they have the labor forces that they need. But if they have a very uneducated labor force, then it's a hard way to start up the new company. And that, I think, is, from a union perspective, really important, that we have these systems that can work together, so we can keep the speed up in the transition period, and don't let people go, because we know that if you have been out of the labor market for just half a year, it's really hard to get back in. So I think it's very crucial that we can keep people in the system, and while we are waiting on all the new things to happen, and some of them have been happening. So I think it's a little what you also said, Rui, that it's so important that we have good training systems.
Such critical points. And I think an interesting observation in that as well. Sometimes when we talk about companies, we talk about this monolith of companies, but of course companies are owned by people that live in our communities and participate in social activities, they participate in all of the things that everyone else does. And I think that engagement is really critical. All of the sectors, all of the collaboration, I think it truly does, as we've said so many times, working together we go farther. I think that is true when we look across those sectors and are very inclusive of them. All very good examples and practical examples that are appreciated that you've shared. The next segment that we're going to explore actually looks at something that has come up already a couple of times, artificial intelligence, of course. And so this notion of local leadership and artificial intelligence will be thread throughout this next segment of questions. Big changes need big leaders. Local leadership is key to build collective willingness to act and respond to transitions and shocks. In your opinion, this is kind of anyone can take this question, please. What type of local leadership is needed to successfully anticipate and respond to change? Yeah, go ahead, Mary.
The mayor should go first. Well, I am a local leader, and I think it's very important for a local political leader to be very what's it called? Synlig. Visible. Thank you. Very visible in your local community and being the one that both brings in optimism and courage and gathers people in spite of political differences, despite of ethnical differences or what it could be, and showing the successes. And as I've told you, Køge is a success, and that is a very positive platform to stand up for the next transitions. And being able to stand together in a time where transitions are huge, I think that is very important. And I, as a mayor, are very keen on being the one that gathers people and not creating differences. And when it comes to, for example, AI or gathering data, and somehow it's not being scared of it, but it's also showing that it can be a huge help. Nana and I had a talk just before we went in here, and I, for example, think that AI can be a huge help in, for example, being a more healthy population. I think it would be so great to have my own AI coach helping me not to put on too much weight, for example, or helping me getting exercise, or my old father who needs some exercise, reminding him what to do. I think that is some of the transitions that I, as a local leader, also can help the citizens of Køge being happy to engage into and not being afraid of. Showing the opportunities, being positive about it, and not being too scared, and having standing together about it. That's what some of it.
I think that's incredibly relevant. And Accelerator for America works with mayors across the U.S. and other local leaders. And they're struggling with this AI question right now. I actually posed the question to the 15 mayors in our advisory council just a few weeks ago. If you had a partner to work with this AI implementation, what would you ask them? I got an interesting set of answers. I got some big thinking, like, how can AI be used to solve our housing shortage? How can AI be used to stop violent crime, to pinpoint gun crime, and to take care of the problems we have with youth getting involved in crime? And then I got one really hilarious response that says, how in the world am I supposed to get into AI when my systems are as old as bleep, and I can't even get the data out of them I need now? So, this is a tension for local leaders, that tension between the visionary moment and the daily work. What is certain is that this is coming, this is happening to us, And we at the local level are going to have to find ways to convene, to lead, to be visionary. There will be scary parts of it, and part of the scary part is we don't know what happens next. But there's no doubt that the folks closest to the people, our local elected and appointed officials, are going to have to take the lead on this and take it step by step. Whatever your biggest issue is in your community, explore what AI can do for you, or just get your old stuff up to date and then go out from there.
Mary Ellen, do you have any tricks, any advice with respect to how to actually cultivate that local leadership to take that step?
You know, mayors have this amazing convening authority. You own the biggest megaphones and bully pulpits in your community. And so it's as simple as forming a community task force or holding community meetings. Or, you know, in the case of technology, ask someone half your age what you ought to be doing. And I think our corporate partners are going to be really important on this too. You've heard P3 and partnership come up a lot already here. And what's fascinating is I talk to these big tech giants who you would think have a lot of this figured out, and they're still figuring it out. I asked one of them about housing, because that's one of our biggest issues, and they sort of sheepishly said, yeah, we're still trying to figure out what AI can do about that. So I think we can all grow together. And the mayor has a really important role to put everybody around the table, kind of bring the temperature down a little bit, and start together and figure out what you want to do as a community around that big table.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you for that. I wonder, what are the different roles that leaders from the public, private, and third sector can play in managing transitions and shocks? Any thoughts, Rhea or Hannah?
Let me just talk a little bit very shortly about the issue that Mary talked about in terms of proximity, and also Marie also talked about. For example, our mayor on a 3-month basis has a meeting called Porto City Council, and maybe 20 representatives of the city economy, and the only thing that he does for 3 hours is listening. Just that. They represent, let's say, the landscape of the economy, and I think stakeholder auscultation is very crucial in terms of what can be a good leadership. Otherwise, you are on your desk looking out the window to the big square, but you don't know what's happening outside. So I think proximity and stakeholder auscultation are critical. Just very briefly regarding AI, I think the potential is great, but for that you need good data sets about what is happening in the city. And 4 or 5 years ago, if someone wanted to know what is the landscape of the economic reality of the city of Porto, we didn't have anywhere to say to the people, go to that website, and you can talk about talent, housing, demography, talent, whatever. So we have been investing a lot in information, let's say, data sets, because we are living in a data-driven decision world, and in terms of where I want to study, where do I want to raise a family, where I want to start my entrepreneurial idea, and so on. People want to know what is happening in the city, and for that you need reliable, updated, and transparency in terms of data. And then on top of that, you can work with AI and talk about predictive models and so on. But for that, you need to have, like Mary said, a good baseline. Otherwise, it doesn't make any sense. Regarding your question, that is more difficult. That's why I spent this past 3 minutes. I'm the only one, I think it's the less political of all the panel, but thank you for the tip. The role of the leaderships in public, private, and other sectors.
Yes.
I think in terms of public, the role, for my point of view, is to address the gaps that the market itself cannot address. We talk a little bit about that. So when we see that the market itself doesn't fill out the gap, for example, when people get out of the labor market and then have difficulties getting in. We have policies and we have, let's say, a mechanism that help people get back to the labor market. It can be simple things like building a LinkedIn profile. We can help, and we help people on that aspect. So I think the leadership on the public side should focus on market gaps that the private sector doesn't feel the need to do it because it's not sustainable in terms of economics. So I think that is one of the roles. One of them should be aware of those gaps that only the public sector can address. And in terms of employment and these kind of situations, we have specific programs to do that, because no private company will do that, because it's something that it needs to be public to do it. It makes sense to be public to do it. So that is my keyword, gap.
That's terrific. And I know Marie has a comment. I'm just going to add one thing to what you've shared, Ria, and I think it's an important dimension, is that it requires, I think, an awareness and understanding amongst the different sectors as well. The leadership needs to understand what is motivating someone from the private sector, what is motivating something from the public sector, what is motivating that civil society entity. And I think that's an important component of being able to do exactly what you've just described, is that sometimes they can say, I could get some help from this leader in this sector because that's what they do and that's what's important to them, which is a really important dimension. Thank you for that. Marie?
Yeah, I really agree in this, and also your point of view, Mary Ellen, that bringing people together, that's always good. And in a local democracy, we often know each other quite well because we are a local community, and being able to bring interests together and taking down the temperature, I think you said, that's a very good point, and that's something I can do. And it's also because I know also a lot of the business leaders, I know some of the other stakeholders, and it's in almost every terms of life and big questions, it's good bringing people together and just talking to each other. And one of the things I love about Denmark is that we trust each other very much, and that's a good start, because then you also can show each other your vulnerability and your insecurity, and share with each other, where do I need to get some new knowledge, and how do you do that, because I don't know how to do that. And then we share with each other, and from then on it grows. And I think that's a very good lesson to learn also in the AI question, because that's something new for all of us, and we are all totally insecure in how to use it and what possibilities and challenges there is in this question. And I think some local gatherings between the different kind of interests would be a very good start. Thank you.
Good. Thank you. We've arrived, I think, at a good moment for us to harvest any questions that may exist. And I see a couple of questions already emerging. Perhaps, is there anyone with a microphone? If not, I can certainly make Oscar. Thank you. Oscar, if we can start there, and then I think Andrew has a question as well. Go ahead, sir.
One thing no one's mentioned is that all transitions through history have been spatially unequal. Not only do people suffer more than, some people suffer more than other people, but some places suffer more than other people. And this spring I had the opportunity, as part of the European Urban Initiative, to visit 3 different former coal mining towns. And in the third one, which was Miers in Asturias, we actually went down the last open mine in Asturias. We went 450 meters down and saw the first 2 kilometers of 200 kilometers of underground galleries that are now closed. So since I went in early May, they've closed that mine, and all the workers will eventually be laid off. Some of them are still maintaining the mine. And Miers itself had 7 or 8 mines. It's in northern Spain. It had 7 or 8 working mines, and all of them have now closed. And I think this was the last open mine in the whole of Asturias. So this is a community that's had to transform itself and has done really well in that process, even attracting high-tech employment. Meanwhile, in Trebollia, which had been the leading city of this three-city alliance, looking at mining, at transitions after mining, they actually have attracted one of the world's most successful software companies, even though their mine has closed. And it's called Derisoft, and they're working even with NASA and other very high-tech. They're basically a metrology measurement company. So the point I want to make is that one of our third company, Rui, was our third city was San Pedro on the edge of Porto, where the mine closed back in 1970, and they had the opportunity to work in the rest of the Porto metropolitan area, so they weren't so affected. But the people in those places, in a sense, probably will never really work again, the people coming out of mining. They're in their 40s or 50s or even older, and they get good pensions, and they'll be okay. But for the next generation, the question is, where will the work be? And I haven't really heard very much, apart from training as a sort of universal panacea, but about how cities and smaller towns can, and it's particularly a problem in smaller cities, big cities like Copenhagen that will always find new futures. But how can smaller cities create new jobs in the transition? And where do you see those opportunities? And coming back from my visit to Miers, my own house, we're doing some insulation work. And there were a team of 5 people with one slightly older boss, 4 young people in there, about 20 to 22, and they're installing chanvre, because the house is in France, so it's a hempcrete insulation. And this was an amazing young team doing a green transition job. And I was thinking how many jobs, and using a difficult piece of equipment to actually blow the hemp in, so that it mixes at the moment of blowing with the lime mortar. Now there could be thousands of jobs in installing hempcrete into buildings and other forms of green insulation, but we don't have the training systems for that in most of the European countries. So my question, and that's just one example of a sort of new green job, which didn't exist 20 years ago. My question is really not how to create the training, but how to stimulate the demand for those jobs and particularly in the areas which are going to be most hit by the transition.
Hey, thank you for your question, sir. I wonder if anyone on our panel would like to respond.
I'll jump off the ledge quickly because I come from one of those places that used to rely heavily on coal and coal mining from Kentucky, and we did a lot of that in the eastern and the western parts of our state, the eastern parts being in Appalachia. And I will not say we have yet done this well. We are still looking in the rearview mirror on coal and still have a love affair with it and the economy that it produced. I think the big struggle starts with a recognition that many of the people who worked in those jobs, they and their families, a generation or two ago, came for those jobs. And that, of course, starts with the history that's important to know, is that throughout the 19th and 20th century, people moved to where the jobs were. Now, we don't like to have to move. Some people move, but not many people move anymore. Mobility is down. And part of that's a good thing because we have more choices now. So starting with that as a baseline, a couple of things I think can positively impact where we are on this. The reshoring aspect of our economy right now, where we're bringing back production into the developed countries, where it's becoming more economical to do so. There are now government incentives to do so. We're doing a ton of that in the US right now. We realize that we outsourced too much of our supply chain and too much of our economy. So that reshoring and the incentivizing through our Inflation Reduction Act, our climate change legislation, is bringing some jobs to those areas. So that is both economic reality and deliberate government policy. The other thing that we're working on at Accelerator for America with some partners is trying to encourage remote work opportunities. So people who want to stay in those smaller communities, don't want to move, but aren't maybe going to find a new job there can remote work from there. And one of the biggest challenges that we're working on with that is ensuring they have access to high-speed internet. We still struggle with that, and it's something that we've pushed and encouraged. We are, as a country, going through kind of a version of rural electrification for broadband right now. That hasn't solved all the problems. There's still a lot more to do. We supported one of our mayors in a smaller city in Middle America who got fed up with his cable company, which was the sole provider of internet, and so he, along with some other government partners, came together and put a ballot measure forward for the citizens to vote for, to pay for their own municipal broadband network, and it passed with 85% of the vote. And so now they're building out a municipal broadband network that will be more affordable, more reliable, and allow people choices to stay in that small town and do remote work.
Thank you for that, Mary Ellen. And thank you for the question, sir, as well. I think we had Andrew just with one rapid question. I think we're going to wrap up after and introduce our next speaker.
Thanks, Andrew Weir from Melbourne. One of the big issues economically facing developed countries around the world has been a slowdown in productivity growth and a lack of business dynamism. And we've talked a lot about helping individuals and communities adapt to change, but not very much about companies and their change. And in my experience, it's actually companies aren't very good at change. And in fact, they're often resistant to change. And that's why partly one of the reasons we've got the productivity challenges that we've got. So, so I guess one of my questions really is how can we help businesses to change and adapt faster to changing economic contexts? Because if they don't do that, it'll be to all of our detriment. We need businesses to adapt quickly so that they thrive in an emerging context. So I just worry that we risk assuming that everyone in the private sector is 100% nimble and adaptable and got their finger on the pulse. And I think that's the wrong assumption if we do assume that. And sometimes we may need to intervene.
Thank you for the question, Andrew. Do we have... Go ahead, please, Mary.
Yes, thank you. In the region where I'm from, we can see two problems in our businesses. One is the resistance in making a new generation taking over the business, from father to son, or from the entrepreneur to a new one. There's a huge resistance, and it's hard to see your little baby, your business, being taken over by someone else. The other one, and perhaps they are linked together, in the region where I'm from, the businesses has a huge lack of employees with a higher education, and they also have a resistance on employing them, because I think, perhaps it's a theory, they feel threatened by people having a higher education than the director has or the CEO has. And that are two very, very obvious challenges we have for our businesses in being able to embrace a transition and being able to and willing to being a part of a transition. Yeah.
Marie, thank you. And I think we'll have to wrap up with your comment, Hannah.
Just a small comment. We just had a big meeting in the unions about AI, and it was very positive. Everybody was cheering for it. We can see some dark skies, but the most important thing I think is that a lot of the workers who were there, they were very afraid of that their companies were not moving forward. So I mean, a lot of the people who work out there, they share this fear of not being able to also be working as fast as themselves for the new tomorrow. So I think it's a very great question, and I think that's something that we're going to work with, because of course we also want all the companies here in Denmark to be working good, because that is good for the workers. They get great salaries and have good jobs. So, but it is something that we should consider. Also the part about how we get new companies to grow out in the rural areas where there have been another tradition, and now we have to change that tradition and let new companies in. So thank you for the question.
Thank you, Nana. I'll ask you, the time's just flown by very quickly for our panel, so I hope you'll join me in thanking Marie, Nana, Marie, and Mary Ellen for their contribution to our discussion this afternoon. Thank you all. Thank you. Thank you. We'll move on. I'm going to introduce our closing speakers as our panelists leave, and I will be extremely brief as well, because I'm looking forward very much to hearing from Karen Ellman. It's my pleasure to introduce to you Karen Ellman, Secretary General of the Nordic Council of Ministers. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It is working, but they didn't find out before. Well, I'm very pleased to be here with you today, and it was really inspiring to listen to the examples and the perspectives from these excellent panelists on how policymakers and also practitioners can actually better equip our communities and our workforce for the future. And this is, of course, a challenge that truly requires a holistic approach and also a cooperation across sectors. As the Secretary General of the Nordic Council of Ministers, I would like to highlight the unique Nordic model. Nana said the Danish model. I dare to say also the Nordic model as this instrumental part of the solution, because this model actually rests on market forces on the one hand and close cooperation between the public sector and the social partners on the other. And historically, this model has really helped us ensure security, resilience, flexibility, and adaptivity, resulting in high employment, innovation, and productivity. And the model has particularly proven its value when our Nordic labor markets have been hit by major external shocks. And that's why I was happy that you also mentioned a very good example, because that is the case of the COVID-19 pandemic, where the Nordic model ensured swift crisis packages, wage compensation schemes, and financial support for businesses. And this prevented mass layoffs and allowed companies and workers to maintain employment during the lockdowns. However, this Nordic model faces significant challenges, and they include the need for a swift green and digital transition, demographic changes, and increased international competition for workers with the right skills, even some growing protectionism, I might say. But anyway, these factors particularly affect our small, open Nordic economies. And studies show that the Nordic countries' ability to ensure a skills match between business needs and workers' competences is actually close to European average. At the same time, the Nordic countries are investing substantially in education and lifelong learning, and now the accelerating transitions demand that we, I would say, once again, step up to the plate and do what we do and do it together. And how do we make this happen? Because one approach is also to align our efforts with the Nordic vision. There's the vision in Køge Kommune, there's the vision in Denmark, but of course, jointly with all the Nordic countries, we have a Nordic Vision 2030, setting the goal of becoming the most sustainable and integrated region in the world by 2030, as the minister also said in his opening remarks. And I believe our vision has a lot in common with the theme of this whole conference, and also, of course, this specific session. The Nordic vision highlights collaboration between the Nordic countries and among labor market parties, which are employers and employees. The Nordic vision champions social inclusion and equal opportunities, ensuring everyone plays a role in the green transition. The Nordic vision embraces innovation and tech as our allies in fortifying the Nordic labor market and crafting green solutions. And the Nordic vision underscores the importance of education and skills development to meet the evolving green and digital demands of the labor market. Simply, we must equip our workforce. And then we need to enhance job mobility by creating a more flexible, inclusive, and dynamic labor market. And this includes removing barriers to mobility across sectors and across regions. I mean, you see the bridge. Even though we have made great progress, there are still obstacles, but they're getting solved. We need to keep on promoting lifelong learning and ensuring that workers can easily transition into new roles in response to changing market demands. So still, we need to do more. And I think the OECD Skills Outlook 2023 addresses the existence of skills mismatches, where skills and competences of the workforce fail to align with the job demands. The skills gap could potentially undermine companies' competitiveness and productivity, and it also creates the risk of leaving Nordic citizens behind, especially those outside the major cities, and challenges the country's social cohesion and consequently also their resilience. So as I mentioned earlier, addressing the skills gap also involves ensuring the free movement of labor between the Nordic countries. A large, well-known Danish company, gives us a very illustrative example, because they're actually sending buses to Spain and to Portugal to recruit workforce they need in their expansion up here. Meanwhile, there is plenty of available hands just across the Øresund bridge. And while both our healthcare systems and private companies are actually crying out for workers, unemployment is actually still rising in the outer Nordic regions. At the same time, only half as many Nordic citizens commute across our countries compared to the EU average, despite having had a common labor market agreement for more than 70 years. So let's gain perspective and jointly steer this transition towards a success. And I would say that in the Nordic cooperation, we would very much break free from the silos and foster collaboration across the private and the public sector between employer and employees, within communities and companies, and across national borders and departmental boundaries. And this aligns very closely with the key policy recommendations of the OECD Skills Outlook 2023, which advocates for strengthening collaboration between educational institutions and employers alongside greater investments in skills development. I know time is running out. I took many good notes, would like to comment a lot, but just finally let me share another example from the Nordic region, this time of lifelong learning initiatives that actually respond to the changing demands of the working life. Skills forecasting is very high on the agenda in all countries. And in Finland, they have developed a digital tool to analyze data to reveal skill demands across professions and industries and how these needs to evolve. And this service, I could call it like a competence needs compass, if you will. This tool really helps the stakeholders in education and employment services by offering insights for developing training programs and career paths. So it can be done, but I believe that the Nordic model, Danish model, Nordic model, will need to prove that it is fit for purpose once again. And therefore, in the Nordic Council of Ministers, we are taking the initiative to facilitate a Nordic tripartite dialogue with the aim of effectively bridging the skills gap. We will bring together employers, workers, and representatives from the education sector across the Nordic countries. We know the challenges which are similar all across the Nordic region, and our focus there, of course, will be on the solutions. So I'm confident that our Nordic cooperation and our tripartite model is the way forward, because together we are setting new benchmarks for a much needed transition in the Nordic labor market. So having said that, thank you, all of you. I know you are supposed to be going on different tours now around the region, I guess. So thank you for listening. And is the floor over to you, or do I just send out people? It's to the other Karen. Now I can introduce the other Karen. Thank you very much.
Great. Thank you so much, Karen, and also for reminding us about how important we are. Each little node is part of a bigger set of groupings. Like we're in Greater Copenhagen, we're part of a broader model, and I think this is the model that everyone is looking to come here to take back to their communities. So I'm grateful for your closing remarks. So just a couple of notes as we wrap up here our 2 days in the forum. So again, a huge thank you to all of the different partners, including our hosts here today, here at UNCD. Thank you, Henrik. But of course, Greater Copenhagen and a number of different partners who hosted us in city halls on both sides of the border, and all the other partners who contribute, and of course all the participants for contributing, speakers, and all of you here. You were able to take away, I hope, a lot of examples. The reason we wanted the event here in Greater Copenhagen is because we know the eyes are on Greater Copenhagen. A lot of people are interested in what's happening here on so many different fronts, and we hope that you're taking back those great examples, but also all the other ones from Melbourne to Maastricht we heard about as inspiration for us. And as you heard last night, next year, Barranquilla, Colombia will be the location of the next forum. And when we were talking to them, they of course were very keen on links with Greater Copenhagen, because they are very excited also about learning on the green transition and what are the benefits that we can all get from our different examples. I want to just flag as well that there are lots of different OECD reports on the topics that we were discussing today. Karen just mentioned one of them on the Skills Outlook. Lots of different reports. We were talking in the panels this morning about green jobs, green skills, and you can check out a couple different reports on that. And one of them also I want to flag that was launched here at the forum, the Geography of Green Innovation Hubs in OECD Regions, where Jan mentioned earlier this morning, and Greater Copenhagen clearly stands out in the global context as an innovation hub for green innovation and an inspiration for many of us. Lots of other reports that you might be interested in. Missing entrepreneurs, we heard this morning from a couple colleagues, Ahmed and Savash, about the need to support entrepreneurs from different population groups, different regions, and so we have a whole body of work looking at how to make sure that our policies are a bit more inclusive on that front. So a huge thanks to the teams on both sides of the border, and also our partners and the colleagues here at the OECD who make it happen. If I could show you the number of WhatsApp messages that are required behind the scenes to make these things run smoothly, you would get a feel for that. Stay tuned, because in between these big annual events, we have lots of different activities that are online that you can participate in. And so don't forget to sign up. Just Google Local Development Forum, OECD, sign up. We've got all sorts of great events online that you can learn from, whether it's your community's hosting a global event like the Olympics, or you're trying to figure out challenges with deindustrialization and how your communities have changed. We've got webinars on all of those topics. So now to close, we have a couple of site visits, as was alluded to. So on the housekeeping, just out of curiosity, raise of hands, how many people are planning to go to either the mussel farm or the railway district? All right, excellent. So there will be buses right out front, in front of UN City. The same bus will take to both sites, so you don't have to worry about which bus. Just get on the first bus so you can head over. The buses will take you there, and then at the end, they'll take you back to Central Station in Copenhagen, so a transit hub to facilitate your access to wherever else you're going later on this evening. So I hope you enjoy both the mussel farm and the railway district. Part of the forum is really getting a flavor for all of the local activities, and we hope you continue to enjoy the forum through the site visit. So a huge thanks again, and a round of applause to everybody who participated here today. Thank you. And safe travels back to your respective homes.